Thank you so much. Today we are joined by a longtime festival favorite and Grammy award-winning violin soloist, Augustin Hadelich. Thank you so much for joining us this week on our weekly interlude with SCMS.
Hi, it's great to see you.
So you're home in New York, is that correct?
Yeah, I've been living in New York for about 16 years, but actually I've been spending the last few months in Connecticut with my wife's parents, and just sitting at home. And it was a difficult adjustment at first. I think for all musicians who travel a lot, is that you go from a very exciting life where there's something where you're in a new place every few days, and there's always all these people you meet and all these musicians I was playing with and audiences I was performing for, and suddenly I'm stuck at home for a long time, and like not even sure like when it's going to start again. So that was an adjustment, but it was an opportunity maybe to tackle other projects that I normally wouldn't have time for, certain recordings and making videos, and just trying to still connect.
Yeah, that's great. We'll jump into those videos here in just a second. I have a couple questions about them, but first I also want to make sure you, your family, everybody there is doing well, staying safe, staying healthy.
Yeah, so everything is so far so good.
Great, that's good. That's an important part of all of this, and a big reason why we're having to be isolated like this. So I'm glad to hear you're doing well there. I guess the first thing I want to ask about is something that you recorded before everything kind of came to a stop, but just actually went live earlier this week. I saw that you were involved with one of the Tiny Desk concerts there for NPR. Can you tell us a little bit about the process of that, or what that was like?
Well, I had always imagined it as being a small room, but it's actually an incredibly big room that just has like cubicles and different office corners. So that the space is not actually that small, but it certainly has an acoustic that's really challenging to play a string instrument in. So it's a very it's not an ideal place to play the violin in, because you don't really have a room acoustic to kind of help the sound, and it's also quite close in the upright piano. So that in a way there are a lot of hurdles that it's not an ideal place to play. But I love all the all the decor, all the little stuff that's behind us, and actually all of the people at NPR are gathered for these performances and kind of like in a semicircle. It was a little crowd that are watching it, and it was pretty exciting.
One of the things that was, I thought, particularly interesting with that is that you were using a new violin. I mean, not obviously a new violin, but you've been using a Del Gesù violin.
Yeah.
So how is adjusting to that, or getting familiar with that particular instrument's voice?
Well, so I started playing on that in early December, and I had a chance to play maybe 3 months of concerts on it until all this happened. And it's with any violin, when you switch instruments, it's quite a big adjustment. I had been playing on the previous violin, which was also very beautiful. It was a Stradivari. I'd been playing on that for a little under 10 years, but a long time, and was really well adjusted to it. I knew exactly what sound would come out, and I had learned so much about the instrument. This one is very different. Guarneri del Gesù is the other great famous Cremonese maker. His violins are a little different. The sound is maybe a little bit richer and darker, and it's very, very beautiful, but they have to be played a little bit differently. I think what it is that generally the wood is slightly thicker on Del Gesù's, and as a result, the sound is maybe a little richer, but it takes more effort to get the sound started, to articulate, to kind of draw it out. So it needs some adjustments in playing to really make the most out of it. But it's enormously fun to play, and there are aspects of the sound that I'm still discovering, but that I absolutely love. But basically all of the sound colors and nuances it feels like I'm in a different place. Like they can be done too on this violin, but it's as though if you practiced on an organ and you have all of the different stops, in a certain place, and now you go to a different organ and they're in a different place. You have to like figure out how to do each thing. You can still actually, I can produce the same kinds of colors and sounds on this one, but I have to do it somewhat differently, and it's been a fun discovery actually. It's kind of every piece feels new, and it's something that also I don't know, it kept things pretty exciting even during this time that I'm at home, that when I'm playing the violin, because it's still a rather new instrument and I'm still discovering things about it. That's actually made practicing still quite fun. And I mean, practicing isn't really fun, so I have to say, like, usually the part where I have fun is when I play with other people, when I perform, that's the part that it's fun. But it's been kind of fun to like discover everything this violin can do, and I just really just love the sounds, especially up close, because there's this phenomenon that Stradivari violins sound have quite a bright, kind of brilliant sound, very, very clear, very brilliant, and it's lovely how fast the sound seems to just respond. You just touch the violin and immediately the sound comes flying out, and it's wonderful. But they tend to sound their best in bigger spaces. Like when you get into the hall, that's when they really shine. And Tel Jesus are a little different, that they actually sound really unbelievable up close. It's especially up close that there are things in the sound that are just unbelievable. And since I'm now playing only in small spaces, it's been kind of perfect to play on this violin.
How did that partnership or relationship to receive this violin, for an extended loan come about? I mean, I know everybody's always looking for their voice with an instrument, but you had obviously a great instrument that you'd been using for a long time. So what sort of sparked this idea to try out or find a different instrument?
Yeah, I wasn't really like actively, trying violins, like trying to find something. I mean, I was actually very happy, but the owners of this violin had heard me a number of times in concerts, and so this violin is a very famous violin del Gesù. It's I think it's the last violin he made, and it used to be the violin of Henryk Schering, the great Polish virtuoso. He played it for 30 years and made a lot of his famous recordings on it. It has been considered for a very long time, for over 100 years, has been considered one of the greatest del Jesus, one of the greatest violins in existence. But the last 30 years, it hasn't really been heard in public. So of course it takes a little bit of time for an instrument like that to kind of come alive again. When a violin hasn't been played really regularly, for hours every day, then it doesn't quite ring the same way as when you kind of get it vibrating a lot every day. Then it starts to somehow loosen up and really get in. It's a little bit like getting your voice in shape. I don't know how to explain it. Yes. So they had decided, after hearing me in a number of concerts, that they wanted now this violin to be heard again. If they also felt it's a pity that one of the great violins out there with such a beautiful sound isn't heard in concert, and so they showed it to me, and I tried it. I have to say, like, the first few notes I played on it, I mean, it was really, really beautiful, but I could tell this violin is a little bit like out of shape. It really just opened up like crazy for the first couple of weeks that I played it, especially. But even now, I think, actually right now, it's sounding, I think, a little bit better than it did 2 months ago when I was still playing concerts on it. I am getting to know it, and the violin's getting used to really, working.
Kind of getting back into shape, if you will. Yeah. Like it's an organism that has to grow and expand and vibrate and move. So if it hasn't done that, I'm sure it stiffens up.
But I think it's even a factor that when a violin is, like, for example, repaired and glued, the pieces are glued back together, that it takes a little bit of playing to kind of loosen that up a little bit, like, so that so that things are not completely stuck together, but kind of vibrate against each other, the different parts. And I think even that's a factor. It just as the violin keeps vibrating, the sound becomes
warms up even a little
better
bit
and
more.
better. Yeah,
that's great. So to switch sort of gears, you've been very busy during these last couple months when you've been in quarantine, just like everyone else. There's so many projects I want to ask about. I guess the first one I'll jump into is one that I thought was very fun. It featured 14 different musicians, the Bach chaconne at home, if as you will. So I know you didn't come up with the idea, but you were the one that did all the editing for it. Tell us a little bit about that and like how it came about and what the work on the back end to put it together for the final product, I guess, was like for you.
I don't know. It was at the time, I think it was in early April. And, I was texting with different musicians and just, I mean, everyone was, actually, I saw that everyone was kind of doing this. It was an instinct suddenly that a lot of people felt we have to keep in touch somehow. We want to keep staying connected. And I was in touch with Julia Fischer, a German violinist, and we've collaborated a number of times, and I really like her playing, and we're good friends. And she told me about this idea that she had about the chaconne. And she said, what if we just play, each violinist plays a different variation. And then, I have the kind of mind, I immediately think of all the things that actually can go wrong. That I immediately thought, oh, if one person just sends it to the next one, then as soon as it reaches one person who doesn't actually do their part, the project just comes to a stop. And there's a lot that can go wrong. So we came up with kind of a method of how it can work. So she basically asked some of her friends and colleagues, she made a list of violinists, and we decided, well, we're not going to do 32, we're not going to do 30 violinists, we'll do, in the end it was 14. Because sometimes their phrase, usually the phrases are 8 bars long, but there are actually a couple that are 12 bars. And so anyway, we met, and then I said, I can edit it. I didn't really know what I was getting into, but I've been getting better and better at editing videos. Actually, if I did it now, I would probably do it better. But I said, just have everyone send me the videos, and I'll try to put them together. I felt like I wanted to do it because I had a certain idea of where I wanted to switch from one video to another. I felt like in this music, it needs to switch basically on the right note, that some phrases start after the beat, some phrases start on the beat, that for the whole thing to kind of feel right, feel musical, it had to be done in a certain way, a little bit based on the score. So so that was one reason why I was kind of eager to do it myself. I would say the hardest thing about it was actually that each person had recorded with a totally different device, totally different acoustic, totally different, sound quality of the recording, and also the volumes even were just, one person was really loud and one person was really soft. And so just adjusting the volume and somehow trying to get the sounds and the resonance to be so that it doesn't feel like you're getting just violently yanked out of one room into another one. That sometimes it can be just kind of disconcerting when the acoustics changes very suddenly. So there was that a little bit of crossfading between one recording to the other, just trying to make the transitions feel right
and balanced. Yeah.
Let's say when I first started doing videos in March, I wasn't such a perfectionist. I was like, well, if it just looks acceptable, then it's fine. And now I'm at the stage where I'm like, I think the colors of my computer aren't really accurate. I need to calibrate them. And now I'm at this, I've reached this stage.
Nice. So should I send this interview to you afterwards?
No,
and you can edit it up for me. It sounds like you've got plenty to do already with that. But so it does sound like you've gained new skills or figured out ways to do it. I'm assuming you've gotten faster, but this feels like a skill that a lot of our musicians, as they've been performing alone or with others, as you have as well, fine tuning it and getting better and better at the technical creation part, as opposed to just the beautiful playing that you guys do.
it's, you know, it's making everyone kind of make this jump into the 21st century, because there are many musicians who are a little bit in the 20th century, and I think some are even in the 19th century technologically. So this is kind of the moment where we all kind of have no choice but to do it. If the device with which you're recording, for example, is compressing the sound, for example, this kind of dynamic compression that it makes soft sounds louder and loud sounds softer, which you might want that in a conversation like this, you know, or when you're filming something at a party, just so you can hear everything. But for classical music, that's the worst thing you can do, because
you want that range.
the music lives from the kind of phrasing and, you know, these kinds of contrasts, and, you know, just finding good microphones, managing to get a good sound, that was a process. And some of the engineers that I've worked with recently, they've helped me a lot with sorting out some of these problems, also recommending mics and some equipment. And just when I was having just basically some technical problems with just getting the sound to be really, really nice for these videos. For me, as a classical musician, I mean, 99% of what I care about is the sound ultimately. But then I also think, well, if we try, we want to make as great a product as we can, like whatever it is. This is why I think sound is just as important for Facebook or Instagram video as it would be in a recording. And of course, the visual component has to look nice too. So then I got into lights and cutting of the video, like cutting from angle to angle. I want that to be more precise and more in sync. So now I'm using Final Cut and not iMovie, which I was just losing a lot of time with. And but it's I find that it's kind of never ending, because every time I get better at one thing, then I'm like, well, now I could just learn these other 10 things that and add all these other effects. So
it's kind of like playing the violin. As soon as you get really proficient at one part of it, then it's like, oh, I got to perfect that part. So it's always sort of, there's more to learn and more to improve on those things.
It's been pretty fun actually, because it's very satisfying. I always felt this way about recordings actually. This was always very satisfying when I've completed something. It's an incredibly satisfying feeling, and it's something that's actually been really motivating, because I don't have concerts now or rehearsals to prepare for, so this makes me work and practice, because I set the goal for myself. Now I want to make a video of this piece, and so it's been very motivating.
That's great. One of the other things I thought I would ask about a little bit is I've seen that you've been doing, sort of the Ask Augustin from home type of thing, like a little masterclass series. Most of the videos, there's a few that are a little longer, but most are sort of 5 minutes or less as far as the length. Are those questions that people have sent to you, or are those things that you feel like, I mean, I remember when I was really, learning the instrument and working on these things, like this was a challenge for me. So I want to share, techniques and tips on how to improve, or, why did you end up deciding this was the right time to start kind of doing this project?
But I actually wanted to do this about 2 years ago. It was after I released the Paganini Caprices that I thought, what if I made a video series where I just talk about all these different techniques? Because people were asking me questions sometimes on Instagram and Facebook. But back then there was so much else going on, and just even getting all these technical questions settled, anyway, it kind of fell by the wayside. So it was one of the first things I thought about when I was here at home. I said, let me finally do this thing that I've been meaning to do. And I, in fact, actually started with a question on ricochet, which I'd gotten a lot. So some of these questions, yes, are things people have asked. Some are also just things that's, I wish I could go back in time and tell myself, in fact, I just made an Ask Augustin that's actually like a flashback video where, I'm 13 playing Sibelius, and I am, and the video of Sibelius that was recorded just a few months ago. And I kind of talk about some of the things that I learned and that I wish I could just tell my 13-year-old self. Actually, a few people have said, don't give away all your secrets. That's not a smart move. I don't really think about it that way, because these are, even if, first of all, these tips may not be like helpful for every person. That's that. But also, there's a lot more to playing the violin well or being a good musician than just like tips like these, than just like knowing what to do. There's a very, very long process to figure out things for yourself, like how do you apply it for your particular physique, and also musically. There were a lot of, I got tons of amazing advice when I was growing up that maybe I didn't take all of it because I didn't understand all of it. So but I wish that there were some things that I learned later on that I feel like they're actually not that complex. I wish somebody had just told me when I was 12. Just some technical things about legato. I had an episode now, or and also some musical concepts that just didn't come up, and so I hope people find it helpful. And it's not really meant to be like a lesson substitute. It's just like little tips and thoughts, and sometimes about music I'm working on right now, and other times, actually at first, when I did the first few episodes, I thought I would run out of topics. I thought, well, I only have 3-4 ideas, and then I guess I'll stop. And now I just made episode 31, and I actually have like another 10 things already set that I'll talk about next.
That's great.
Because it's there's so much to talk about in music, and especially if you really get into details. I'm having, you mentioned it's about 5 minutes. Some of them are a little longer, but usually when I start cutting them, it's like 30 minutes. And I actually have to cut out a lot. And some things that maybe are actually also not so bad, but it's, I don't want these episodes to be like 15 or 20 minutes. They should be short enough that it's like some useful information in like a short span. Yeah.
They're really quite fascinating. And, I'm not a violinist myself, but I would think they would be a great resource for those that are practicing and playing and wanting to improve, little aspects of their playing. So, wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing those. Just out of curiosity, we've been asking all of our musicians, so you're keeping obviously very, very busy with recording and performing and putting together all sorts of videos for other folks even. Are there other things that you and your family are doing while you're in quarantine? Are you reading anything? Are you binge watching stuff? Is there, a chance to get into the kitchen or slow down and do the things that when you're on tour you don't ever really have an opportunity?
It is a chance to do some things that you always wanted to do and never had the time. So I know people who certainly were like, I'm going to learn a new language, or to do stuff like this. I think in the first week or two, I was playing a lot of video games. I was watching a lot of things. I just was like, I guess I'm going to have a little, it felt a little bit like a holiday, but it quickly stopped feeling like a holiday, because a holiday is voluntary, right? This is something that just suddenly, we don't know how it'll restart, but the feeling like I have to do something because I have to somehow set a new, embark on new projects. And since then, I've actually feel like maybe been working more than I usually would, which is which seems crazy. And one of the things I used to do always in New York was that I would play board games with a group of friends, and we would meet whenever we could, whenever we were all in town. We would get together and play different board games. And sometimes it was something I even did on trips, that I would go on board game cafes, and I've done that in Seattle as well. But now I've been playing with those people online. A lot of these board games can be played online, and actually I've done that on a lot of evenings here, and that's been a nice pastime, because it keeps I don't know, it somehow keeps me connected to my friends.
Well, I really appreciate you spending some time chatting with us, while you're at home and figuring out all these other great projects. You know, we're very thrilled that you're going to be able to take part with us this summer and join us.
It's just a new situation, and it's an enormous challenge for classical music, classical musicians. And, you know, we do need to try to somehow find a way back to live performances when we can. But in the meantime, we'll do, you know, whatever it takes to still try to make music and make chamber music. I think this is something that I'm missing particularly, is making music with other people. And this is why I always had such a great time in Seattle, because I love the other musicians who go there, and it's always such a great experience to be there with other people and make music together. And so we'll do whatever we can to still make that happen.